Welcome to Leading Beyond Limits, the podcast where we explore the extraordinary journeys and insights of remarkable leaders who have pushed the boundaries of what's possible. Your host, Angel Radcliffe, who is a digital transformation leader, author, speaker, and financial educator, will lead each episode and dive deep into the stories, strategies, and philosophies that have empowered these exceptional individuals to lead, inspire, and achieve beyond the ordinary. We're about to embark on a journey of discovery and inspiration, and together, we'll learn what it takes to lead beyond limits. So grab your cape, or at least your favorite coffee mug, because we're about to unravel the extraordinary tales of trailblazers who've turned impossible into I'm possible. Let's get started.
Deborah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here to discuss mentorship. And it's definitely a topic that I feel like you're super passionate about. And I was reading your bio and everything that you're into. So how about we start off and you tell us how you became passionate about this topic?
Sure. It didn't just happen. I'm an applied developmental psychologist, and I was studying everything no one ever wants to have when they're older. I'm an aging specialist. So I was looking at Alzheimer's disease, frailty, depression, and someone asked me, what do we have to look forward to? And I was stumped. So I thought, oh my gosh, what do we have to look forward to? So I decided to go back to the drawing board and see if I could figure that out. So I went back to all the literature, the research, and, theorists. And I found out that there was all this stuff that had been researched and looked at, but just wasn't making it out to the masses. And so I dug in and found out that we have an emotional developmental lifespan trajectory where in midlife, we have a desire to give back to others without expecting anything in return. So that phrase, "'tis better than to give than to receive," is actually true. And so when I was looking at that, there are 3 different ways that we can give back: volunteering, mentoring, and philanthropy. And I thought, well, not everybody can put their name on a building. And, we all tend to volunteer, but mentoring really got me interested because it's giving a piece of ourselves to somebody else. So I really dug into interviewing about 45 people from a 4-star general to grandmas to see what they felt about mentoring. And they all had the same thing to say. It was almost like interviewing the same person over and over and over again. It was such a meaningful experience for them, and it made them feel relevant, useful, like they meant something in the world, like they mattered. Kind of like It's a Wonderful Life, that they actually got to feel that through mentoring, the feeling that they changed the world in some small way, even just by mentoring someone. It really got me passionate about studying all the aspects of mentoring and how it can help us from the mentor's perspective. We usually think of mentoring from the mentee's perspective, but I was really interested in it from a lifespan trajectory sort of framework, and looking at it from the mentor and what they get from it and how that makes their world different. So that's really how I became passionate about mentoring.
And, looking back at your career journey and even going back to, if you think education wise, were you lucky enough to have any mentors in your life?
Oh my gosh, yes. I go all the way back to my grandfather when I was 5. He was my very first mentor that I'm sure I had others, but the one that I can really remember very clearly. We would go driving through the streets of Des Moines. I was from Des Moines, Iowa originally. And he would drive and talk about people that we would pass all the time. And he'd say, "Hey, you see that lady? She's had a rough day, but she's putting her kids through college." And I thought he knew all these people. I don't know if he did or not, but he would tell me about all these people, and he would always say, you never know about a person until you get to know them. You can't know anything about them just by looking at them. Everyone has a story. And it resonated so much that, I'm a psychologist now, that stayed with me all those years. So he was mentoring me every Saturday morning on the car ride, while he was giving my mom a break from watching me and mentoring me at the same time. So he was my first mentor. And since then, I can't even count them all, just tons and tons of mentors who've shaped my life.
And I appreciate you sharing that story. And because when we look at the corporate environment, and there's so many times where you'll see someone that needs help or who's trying to grow through their career, and they don't have the proper guidance, they don't have the proper leadership. I think we both know a lot of organizations and companies don't invest in leadership development the way they should. So, for someone who is not lucky enough to have a mentor and they want one, like what steps would you take to find one?
So what happens is mentorship is misunderstood by a lot of people and by most people. And it's so widely defined that it's hard. It makes it even harder for us to say, oh, how can I find someone? So most of us are always being mentored and are mentoring others laterally. Those are the people not above us in the workplace, but our colleagues. They are our friends. There are other people. And we're doing this naturally. So when you ask someone, hey, can you help me with something that you're an expert in? I'm not. And the person helps you. That's really mentoring. At work, when we're looking to have someone help us move upward, that's where it gets tricky because people say, oh my goodness, I really want to ask someone above me, but I feel like I'll be a burden or something like that. And I write about this in the book, The Mentorship Edge, with the example of Irene Yakbist. She is someone who was at NASA and she was on the mission to Mercury, really smart. And she moved from NASA to another large corporation doing similar things, using her engineering skills and that background in the same kind of way. But it was a whole new lay of the land. And it didn't matter that she'd been working for decades. What mattered was it was a new place. And every person who walks into a new job has a little twinge of that middle school cafeteria kind of thing where you're walking in and you're like, "Ooh, where's my table? Where do I go?" So she had that. And what most people can do is they can reach out to somebody in the way that Irene did. She happened to be at a conference within her organization, and someone a few levels up above her said, "Hey," to the whole crowd, "I'd like to mentor anyone who's interested." And Irene was unsure of herself. She said, I feel too uncomfortable to approach her. And I said, why don't you send her an email? And rather than say, hey, I'd like you to mentor me, say, I'm new here and I'd love to get the lay of the land from you. Do you have 5 minutes for coffee where you can sort of help me out? And the person immediately responded to her and said, yes. So the recommendation that I give to people when you're looking for mentorship is to really reach out to somebody and say, hey, do you mind giving me some advice? And you see where that leads. A lot of people think that mentorship has to be like an arranged marriage where if you ask somebody for help, they're your person for life. We should be getting a ton of mentors, not just one. And we should be seeing if this person is someone we want to stick with. Do we want their advice? Is it someone that we value their opinion? Because if not, it's great. You can cut loose and go get somebody else. But if it is, it's going to be a two-way street between both of you. And it's going to be really wonderful, like it was for Irene, whose mentorship with this person went well beyond that and lasted for a couple of years. So that's really the way that I look at it for looking for a mentor in the workplace.
And I love that example because it can be something so simple and starting off as a 5-minute conversation that can lead to building a cadence and long lasting relationship. And oftentimes I find in my experience that many people are afraid to ask for help because it makes them look incompetent in some way, or maybe they just don't want someone to know that they don't have a certain skill set, or you've probably seen this, but you have people who will kind of buff up their skills on their resume to get a job, and then now they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, but I can't go to anyone because I already said I knew how to do this." It's like it just takes really just finding someone that you trust and speaking up and asking for help is really how you've explained it, and I love it. It's so simple.
You bring up a great point here when you say, that you need to have trust. That's one of the key components of mentorship. And you may not find somebody above you that you feel like you can trust to say, hey, I feel insecure. And you know what? I'm not quite sure about how to do that job. Nobody wants to do that. That's why I think in those cases, you look laterally. So you look for somebody in a different department, maybe somebody who is at your level, but in a different area or who has an expertise, or maybe even somebody who's higher up, but not in your department. Because it's very hard and it's legitimate to say, I don't know that I want somebody to know all of my vulnerabilities. It's very easy to say to somebody, you know what, just tell people how you feel truly and honestly, but it doesn't really work out that way in the workplace. So I want to validate everybody who's feeling like, gee, I'm not going to do that. So I say go laterally or sort of diagonally so that you can actually find somebody that you do trust.
I love it, Deborah. And, looking at the opposite end of the spectrum, because you just laid out how someone can really find a mentor, but what if you're that person who wants to give back, who maybe you are wanting to step into another role and you're like, let me train someone up, or how can I train someone or build their confidence up? They want to be a mentor. How can they find a mentee?
I always look at it from the mentor perspective. And a mentor has to find somebody who wants their expertise. So it really always is a matching thing. It's kind of like when you go out and you're making friends. You're not friends with everybody you meet. You might meet somebody and say, they're nice, but I want to spend limited time with them. Or I don't like that person at all. Like this is how it works with mentorship. So when you are out there saying, gee, I have this expertise that like to give back to someone, not everybody's going to want it. So you have to really use those immediate first interactions to find out, does this person want what I'm offering? Because in the workplace, we see a lot of mentoring not work because the mentee and the mentor want different things. And then when we have that, it becomes a job. It is not a mentoring thing because it has a sort of an extrinsic motivating factor there. I better do this because of my job. That they will think I'm a failure if this mentorship relationship doesn't work or something like that. It's pretty simple if you're able to say, hey, like that one person said in Irene's case, hey, I'm willing to mentor, here's what I can offer. If you're able to put that out there, you're going to have somebody who's going to come up and say, yeah, I'm that person. Or can I pick your brain with that? And it may not be the person you were imagining it would be, but you'll find somebody that'll come up and say, you're just the person I've been looking for.
And for someone who is a mentor or wanting to be a mentor, like what key elements really distinguish successful mentorship? Like how can they really like look back at themselves and do a reflection and know that they did a great job?
So a lot of people say, I'm going to give out all of these things that you have to do, but it's kind of the same as a friendship. And in the sense that when you're a good friend and when somebody's a good friend to you, right? If somebody throws you under the bus, not a good friend. You really know that relationship. But I'm going to lay it out for what really makes a good mentoring relationship. The first thing is that the mentor needs to be generative. That's where I mentioned that midlife life stage that we hit naturally, where you want to give back to others without expecting something in return. You're doing it because you care, because you want to do it. The second thing is it has to be intrinsically motivated. And what that means is there's no award, reward, or anything else attached to it. You would do it if no one knew you were doing it. And the example of this that I give that distinguishes between intrinsic and extrinsic is I say to people, how many of you in the room would like to give back your time to work in a soup kitchen, giving food and beverage to hungry, thirsty people? Most people raise their hand and they say, I would feel good doing that. Make me feel really good. Then I say, okay, now how many of you would go volunteer time at Starbucks, giving out food and beverage to hungry, thirsty people? And no one raises their hand. And it's the same activity, giving out food and beverage to hungry, thirsty people. But one is intrinsically motivated and one is extrinsically motivated. You feel like a chump if you go to Starbucks and you volunteer your time there while everyone else is getting paid. So we need that in mentorship, that intrinsic motivation, because we feel good when we do it. We also need to have a meaningful connection. If you don't really like the person that you're working with, it's not going to work out. It's going to feel like a burden. There's going to be something there that's not really going to move it forward. You also need trust. If you don't have trust, you're not going to open up. You're not going to, the person, it's really important both ways. Most people think it's just the mentee. The mentee has to trust that the mentor isn't going to say, oh my gosh, you don't know your job, you're fired, or bad performance evaluation for you, or I'm going to tell everybody, whatever the deal is. But it's also that the mentor has to trust that the mentee is going to actually take what they're giving them and use it. And they're not going to be like, I don't really care about that. There's nothing worse than giving away something really important to yourself, like your values, your expertise, or your skill, and somebody sort of shoves it aside without any care. That makes us feel terrible. And finally, goals. There has to be a goal there. It could be as simple as, can I get the lay of the land from you in 5 minutes? And that may be your whole entire mentoring relationship, but it can also be something that leads to goal after goal after goal after goal and a long-term relationship that lasts years. So you have to have all of that for the mentor and the mentee. And that's what makes it. You can say to people, oh, you need to listen, you need to do whatever. No, you really need to just have these components together and work it through in the way that works for you and your mentor or mentee in the best way that works for the both of you.
Now, those are really great points, Deborah. And, someone may be sitting here thinking and trying to really lay out a plan for either mentee or mentorship. And you touched on so many components that someone can really integrate. But one of the things that I've seen, so someone's reaching out for help and they are trying to be better at their job or solve a problem. They say they want the mentorship, but it's like once they have that immediate need, then you never hear from them again. Now, for someone who truly wants mentorship and maybe who knows what the roadblock is with them proceeding, how can a mentee maximize benefits of their mentor relationship?
So that has to be a two-way street. I say if you ask for mentorship and it's a 1 5-minute coffee interaction, that's mentorship. It's still mentorship. And people think that it has to be some kind of long-lasting, lifetime relationship, and it doesn't. If you are feeling like this is an important relationship for you that you want to last, then you need to be clear with that mentor or mentee. Hey, I think there's more here for us. I think I have more to give you. I just gave you a little bit, but boy, I have so much more for you. Or I got what you gave me. I want even more. This is great. There has to be something like that. Now, one thing that people often that I see is that a person will get some information from somebody, they go and they use it. They don't get in touch for a while and they come back 6 months later and they say, I'd like some more. That is how, particularly with students, that works. And in the workplace, that's often seen as bad form. So I think that the thing that an adult should do is say, listen, I'm so thrilled with this. You don't break the connection, ghost the person until you meet them again, but you act the way you would in the community with others as well. And that is that you thank the person and say, can I come back if I have more as soon as I've digested this, and leave it that way, but that you don't just drop off. That's never going to lead to good mentoring. That would never lead to any good relationship. So I think that a lot of people think there are different rules for mentorship than there are for like good communication and, good common practices with individuals. But it's really taking those good common practices that we would want anybody else to treat us with, that we're treating others with, and then it usually works out.
I love it. And, one of the things you said was mentorship does not need to be a lifelong relationship. And there's this saying, reason, season, lifetime. So I feel like at different stages of your life, you will have different mentors for different reasons. And so if it's in school or if it's your first entry level job, or maybe when you are first becoming a leader, or even when you're a seasoned leader or executive, you'll have these different levels of leadership, of mentorship, and each person comes in at the right time, but it doesn't need to be life lasting. So I really like that you've clarified that. Because I think some people do get offended, like when they don't hear back from the person and they're like, okay, I thought they really wanted the help. But, kind of moving on, I know you run the mentor project. And so I'd love for you to share more about it and what's the inspiration behind it.
Oh, sure. So the inspiration behind it was I was talking to when I was interviewing mentors, I was talking to some who were super high level people, like the top 1% of in their field, people had changed the world. And they were saying that they didn't have access to students to mentor or to younger people because they were leaving the workplace. So an example is Bill Cheswick. He's one of the fathers of the firewall, and he worked at Bell Labs, and he was retiring and living on a farm. And he was really nervous right before he was retiring because he said, I have absolutely no access to anyone. I'm moving to a farm. And, he said, it's not like I can go to a park and say, hey, kid, you want to learn quantum mechanics? It's not what you can do. We decided to start the mentor project because a few people were saying, yeah, I want a mentor and I don't have mentees. And I thought, how bizarre that these really amazing people have no access to mentees. And we're always hearing about how mentees want to be matched up with mentors. There's a connection problem. And it's that the mentors aren't near kids, and kids who would love to have access to these people have literally no way of getting in touch with them. So we started out with just like 10 people, and everyone told me no one who's, really successful is ever going to want to volunteer their time. And I thought, okay, so we'll be 10 people and we'll have a good time with this. We weren't looking to make money. We were looking to me, it was kind of just, let's see if this works. Like, this is interesting. And I'm having fun with some really amazing people and we're doing good things. So Bill was riding around all over the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and mentoring students in schools. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden we went from 10 to 60, then to 80. And people really wanted to mentor. They just never had a place where they could find, the opportunity to mentor that just wasn't existing in their world. And because everybody was online, people were talking to different people and it exploded. And so now we have more than 100 mentors who have come through our doors and a waiting list of people who'd like to join as mentors who have mentored students around the world in 5 countries. We've reached about 100,000 around the world. And every year we give more than $2 million worth of mentoring hours to students for free who would never have access to some of the amazing individuals that we have in our program. But because it's free, anybody can. So that's really the inspiration, was just to see if it would work, and it does.
Wow, I love it. And, really just having mentors who would like to give back their time and reaching back and teaching the younger generation some knowledge and some things. I think that's very impactful. Now, I want to just clarify because what I know you focus on like students. Now, do you also focus on adult mentoring as well?
What we found as a byproduct is that our mentors started mentoring each other. It was bizarre. We, started because we're a mentor focused organization. We found that our mentors would go to these Friday meetings that we had just so our mentors could meet each other and talk about mentoring with each other or whatever else they wanted to. And people started forming their own companies. We have nonprofits that have formed. So they started mentoring each other and then mentoring each other in the workplaces that they formed. So it's really unbelievable in that sense. So we do focus on students. We also found that we mentor within our own organizations, but I also really do help organizations with their mentoring as well and how they can set up mentoring and make it happen and work for themselves in their organizations to take away some of the roadblocks that they put in place that don't need to be there, so they can have a more organic mentoring program.
I'm glad that you said that because I really wanted to shift into mentorship programs with organizations. But But just going back to your program, I think that's really interesting how the mentors are now connecting and mentoring each other. And sometimes you have to have an organization like yours in order to find people who would like to give back because you don't necessarily find that every day in the workplace.
No, most people, especially if you most people want to give back. My dad as a kid always had a saying, he was like, "Ask for help. Everyone wants to help. And if you find the weirdo that doesn't, you've weeded them out." Like, so we all want to help each other. So it's just that people have a problem, feeling like they're going to burden somebody or something like that. And that just isn't the case. So all of the mentors have come forward and said, "I want to give back." And they have said, "I want to give back more and more and more." They really enjoyed, even if they're working full-time jobs in careers that are really demanding, they still want to give back. So yeah, if you're in the workplace, it isn't like people who are in the workplace are different than the people we have. They're also in the workplace. An example is um, Justin Thompson. He's a very well-known artist and he works for Schultz Creative Studios. He works full time. We sent him to Tanzania to a small town, Sharati, to teach 500 kids Western art and how to cartoon. He uses the vacation time to go and do that. He mentors at work. He does it all the time. It's a kind of a gratification that you get that's far deeper than buying a pair of shoes and that initial feeling that you're feeling, "Oh, this is great. I love it." And then it wears off. The mentoring feeling that's so amazing lasts and lasts. It becomes almost like a high that people chase.
No, that's like really good because I feel like, people do want to be recognized in some sort. So even if it's just someone just saying thank you, for the mentorship or whatever, that really feeds into someone's motivation to continue to do what they do. So I get it. And, just going back to organizations, I don't personally feel like organizations have great mentorship programs. And you may have seen something differently in your experience.
No, I haven't.
Can you talk about how an organization can integrate mentorship maybe into maybe their existing leadership development programs?
Oh, absolutely. Most people put together mentorship programs not because they want to see people being generative and helping others. They do it because they're like, "We're going to increase productivity." That is never going to work if you're doing that. If you're trying to squeeze more out of your employees, leaders should know that is the last thing that you should put out there as a mentorship program because it will feel like an extrinsically motivated system of everyone being told that they are donating their time to working at a soup kitchen, but they're actually working at Starbucks for free. It's not a good, it feels terrible to everyone involved. So the thing that I like to say is to create some organic experiences. And I'll give you an example. I was talking to a judge who was getting ready to retire, and he was saying, "Judges can't be in a situation where they say, 'Hey, I don't know how to do that job. I don't know how to try that case.' Or, like, 'I don't know what to do, how to rule on this.'" That's terrible. You're not gonna be a judge for long if that's what you do. So when people say, "I feel vulnerable and I don't wanna put myself out there," that is legitimate in a lot of areas. So what they did was they put together lunches that were regular, where, regularly happening lunches, and the judges could then turn to somebody at the table where, it was a bring your own bag lunch. You brought your lunch and they sat down and they could turn to the person next to them and say, "Hey, Jim, I know you had a case like this. How did that work for you?" That's very different than going up to somebody and saying, "I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me?" So the organic discussions that they were allowing to happen in these informal settings that they put together purposely were making an enormous difference in how younger judges or newer judges were coming up and being mentored by judges that had already been in the system for a long time. And they were bringing in retired judges to help with that. So, leadership, if they come at it from a position of saying, "How can I allow people to have an exchange of information that both will feel good about and in ways that they'll both feel good about it," that is an unbelievably explosive impact that always happens. It always makes a difference. And you can measure that. You can measure how your cases are working. If you're in a hospital, how many successful, surgeries do you have, or how many, successes do you have on the floor or the unit that you're working on? And that can be that you're setting up organic things like grand rounds, that you're setting up places where people are encouraged to talk about things that they aren't clear on in a safe environment. So by doing those sorts of things, you can make it so that something that you were originally thinking of setting up as performance evaluation turns into something that people are automatically making part of their work life.
So I'm glad that you kind of focus on some metrics there and really like seeing if how that mentorship is playing out. Now, for companies that may be in the middle of implementing a mentorship program, there's always going to be challenges. And for companies that come into roadblocks, maybe there's people who are signing up as a mentor or mentee and then not showing up. How can companies overcome those challenges?
So, what a lot of people do is they try to make it so that it's very operationalized and that there's no wiggle room for anything. They'll either have matching programs and you get matched with somebody like it's an arranged marriage, right? And that you get put out there and you're with somebody doesn't show, and nobody's taking it seriously. That's why. It's because it's been enforced there. It's like saying, okay, Angel, you go out there and you're going to become friends with Deborah right now. And you're like, you know what? I'm good with friends. I don't need another, that kind of a thing. So if you're doing something that's enforced, say you're putting something out there, dial it back. Just do a component of it and don't make it an enforced matched thing. Make it so that people who want to get together and do things can come together in maybe some informal kind of a setting so they can talk with people. That can be like we do with our mentors that just organically happened, that people started mentoring each other. That was a Friday gathering, Zoom gathering over lunch, where people got to talk about what they were up to and what they were doing. There was no real format to it. You can do that in a formal work environment. And that is much better than doing something really structured. You start small and then you move out. So the first group that goes, people start to see, wow, I want to do that too. I like that. That's fun. They have a good time with that. And it ends up being something that grows and develops because people see it and they want to do it.
But I love it. Now, thinking about like long-term benefits and really maybe the future of mentorship, give us some one benefits of mentorship and then the evolution. Like how do you see mentorship evolving like when we think about leadership development?
I think that people are going to start to see that mentorship is just a part of our daily lives. If you, and that leadership is going to start to accept that and embrace it. And that what they'll be looking for instead is for people to acknowledge mentoring. So I have these examples in the book. If I am faced with an issue, like I'll give you the example of Bill Cheswick. He was working at Bell Labs and so his boss came to him and he said, "Hey, Bill, I want you to work on this firewall." And the firewall is the thing that gets it so that you and I can talk safely with each other. We can do our banking, everything we do on the computer, there's a firewall involved. That's Bill. So when he was tasked with working on this, no one person can accomplish that goal. And where he worked, they let you figure it out, right? It wasn't like they said, here's the protocol you have to follow to get this done. So Bill had this task and he got as far as he could get. And then he said, "Oh, I think there's this guy, Steve, down the hall." So he wheelied himself in his office wheelie chair down the hall to Steve and said, "Steve, I think that you probably know this area of engineering that I don't know. Can you walk me through it and see if you can help me through it?" Steve did not benefit in any way, shape, or form from helping Bill. Steve had his own job to do, but he did because that's what we all do at work. We're nice people. So he started working with Bill on it and they were really getting into it and they made progress and then they did it. And then they were the first two, Steve Bellevin and Bill Cheswick wrote the first book on internet firewall. And that's how it happens at work. Now, people don't say, "Oh, that's mentoring," but that is. And if we acknowledge more of that, that inspires more creativity and makes it so that if you're a leader, you're going to try to put people in positions where they can enhance that kind of a relationship, where a person is helping somebody because they want to, and another person is asking another person for help because they know they can. So it's more of a lateralization of mentorship that should be really fostered by leaders and allowing people to acknowledge it by then saying, "Hey, Bill, wow, that was great that you got mentored by Steve. Steve, wow, what a great job mentoring that was. Look at how it turned out. Now you guys are both like famous people in this, internet security world." So that's really where I think that they can take it because everybody feels good and everybody's a winner in that situation.
I love it. And Deborah, I so appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge around mentorship and leadership development. And we're talking about looking forward and the evolution of leadership development. Now, we know these last few years in the corporate space, things have changed drastically just with the remote work and hybrid work environments. So when you think about if we continue this way of these hybrid work environments and people being able to work remotely, what role does technology play in effective leadership?
Oh, I think it's such a good thing nowadays because we can reach out to people we could never reach out to before. And it's not like you see somebody walking down the hall and going into somebody's office. It's so much less intimidating now with technology to access individuals, to reach out to them, to say, "Hey, can you come on a 15-minute Zoom call with me?" I think that leadership should be really embracing that and seeing that as the silver lining to more productivity in the workplace because lateral mentoring and hierarchical mentoring will really take off if that's utilized properly.
Awesome. And tell us about your book. Tell us more about it. Where can people find it?
So it's called The Mentorship Edge. And in it, you'll hear all about what mentoring is and isn't. It defines the difference between things like networking, coaching, advising, sponsorship, all of those sorts of things, and used together. But I also give a ton of vignettes and cases of a million different kinds of environments from work to personal development and why we engage in it, why we want it, and why we need it developmentally. Like this is like walking and running and learning to talk. It's as important as that developmentally for us. So you can find this book at any bookstore, at any online retailer, and you can get it on Kindle, on audiobook, in any format you'd like. I do hope you check it out because there are lots of actionable tips and items in there that should be helpful for anybody in the workplace or in home.
Thank you. And Deborah, any last words you'd like to share with our audience?
Yes, I hope that you'll all look to your left and you'll look to your right. The person you're looking at is most likely a future mentor for you. And I hope that you'll engage with that person and have some kind of amazing mentoring interaction.
Thank you for tuning into another inspiring episode of Leading Beyond Limits. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more from our incredible guests, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. And if you have a remarkable leader in mind who you'd like to hear on our show or any questions and comments, feel free to reach out to us. You can find our contact information in the show notes. Remember, leadership knows no bounds, and with the right insights and determination, you too can lead beyond limits. Until next time, keep reaching for the stars and leading with purpose.
Breaking news for your home. Wayday. Wayfair's big sale is almost here, and you can score the best deals in home. Like up to 80% off everything home. Yes, you heard that right. 80% off with free shipping on everything. Plus surprise flash deals all Wayday long. We're talking outdoor furniture and essentials, rugs, and more. All at Wayfair, and all up to 80% off during Wayday. Shop Wayfair's Wayday from April 25th through 27th.
Wayfair, every style, every home.